Society in 1509 was largely based on inequality and social hierarchy. 94% of people lived in the countryside and the wool and cloth trade were popular. And the structure of the government in 1509 was first the king, second the privy chamber, which was for the king's closest friends, and then the royal household, which was for nobles and servants, then the royal council, which was for nobles and churchmen who helped to govern, and then the courts, which was mostly for nobles who entertained the king, and then sixth was Parliament, and then last the justices of the peace helped to maintain law and order. Henry gained the throne aged 18 in 1509. His brother Arthur should have got the throne, however he died, so Henry then became king. He was known as the Renaissance Prince, which meant he picked up culture from Rome and Greece. He was kind of painted as a powerful athlete. He was excellent at archery. He was also a linguist, so a talented musician and composer. He believed in the divine right of kings, which meant he was a devoted Catholic, and he believed that his power was put into place by God, and so he deserved to be there, and he had the right to be the King of England. And in terms of government, Henry used the Royal Council and the Privy Chamber to help him make decisions. Since Henry did not like day-to-day boring tasks, he delegated power quite easily, which meant he increased the power of his key advisors. For example, we see through Wolsey and Cromwell. Henry's first strength was that he was popular, since he was so different to his father, Henry VII, who was quite disliked by his nobles. Also, Henry was very strong, since he had a team of experienced advisors who could help him run the country. And also, England was very stable at this point and had very little threat of rebellion or any invasions. And also, his marriage to Catherine of Aragon gave Henry connections to Spain. But then Henry's weaknesses is that he was quite naive, since he was only 18 and had no experience governing, and his idea of kingship was mostly based on heroic legends like Arthur and the knights at the Round Table, and so this wasn't very realistic. And also he was disinterested because he wouldn't take part in any day-to-day governing, which allowed a lot of his ministers to gain a lot of power. And also Henry was very stubborn, since he wouldn't let anybody change his mind on any decisions that he made. Henry's aim as king was firstly to win fame and glory in battles, which we see mostly fails. He wanted to make sure he had a clear successor, which was a partial success. He wanted to create a dazzling royal court through architecture, which was a success. And also he wanted to help his people live peacefully and prosperously, which was arguably a fail. Wolsey came from a low birth status, however he was extremely intelligent and charming, which enabled him to build relationships and so gain powers. And he became very rich, a lot richer than his nearest rival, and we can discuss how he managed to gain all this power and wealth. So firstly, he carried out all the boring but important tasks that Henry wouldn't do because he was disinterested. He also had opportunities to influence Henry, since he was a member of the Royal Council. Henry also disliked most of his father's advisors, so this removed any potential threats for Wolsey. And also, Henry had a war with France in 1512, which enabled Wolsey to prove his worth, since he organised a very well-equipped army for Henry in a very short amount of time. And also Wolsey's personality, since he's very persuasive, and so he was a very effective negotiator with other countries. Wolsey was given many roles by Henry. Firstly, he was made Lord Chancellor in 1515, which was the most important role in government. Then he was made Cardinal in 1515 as well, and this was the most powerful religious leader in England. He was made Royal Almoner in 1509, which meant he was in charge of giving charity to the poor. And he was also made Papal Legate in 1518, which meant that he represented the Pope in a different country. And then he was also called the Alter Rex, which meant he was seen as the second king. Wolsey's first reforms regarded enclosures, which was where landowners would stop renting land to farmers and the poor. And Wolsey didn't like how landowners were gaining so much power through this. So in 1517 he began 260 legal cases against these landowners trying to enforce enclosures. However, this was largely unsuccessful because landowners needed this money themselves, and this also meant Wolsey gained a lot of enemies in court, since a lot of people in court were landowners as they had a lot of wealth. And then also Wolsey tried to reform the justice system because he wanted to make it fairer for all people, as he didn't want the rich to be above the law. And so to do this, he strengthened the Star Chamber and encouraged poor people to bring cases to court. And this was partially successful, as some people were actually helped, but the courts ended up becoming too crowded, and then Wolsey became preoccupied in foreign policy. Wolsey also reformed taxes, so he replaced the 10th and the 15th tax with the subsidy, and this was based on the real wealth of taxpayers. So instead of giving everybody a certain value of tax to pay, no matter if they were rich or they were poor, instead this tax meant a percentage of your earnings were given as tax, so it was fairer for people. And then forced loans were also given to major landowners in 1522 and 1523, and most people saw these as fair, although a lot of these taxes were spent on royal spending, so for example in the courts, and also on unnecessary wars. And then also the forced loans were given to landowners and people who had power, which again made enemies for Wolsey at court. Wolsey also wrote the Eltham Ordinances, which was to tackle misspending in the royal household. And so he made a list of rules, 79 chapters long, which include cutting spending on meals, so only having food prepared for 3 meals a day and not whatever. And also he wanted to lay off sick servants or unneeded servants. And he also wanted to reduce the Privy Chamber from 12 to 6 people. And this was his main reform, so after he got the Privy Chamber cut down from 12 to 6, he generally forgot about the other reforms and didn't really pursue them. So in this sense, they kind of failed. And also Wolsey became preoccupied with the annulment and foreign policy. And also the amicable grant was a tax that failed, which was ordered by Wolsey, because Henry wanted to invade France in 1525, and so Wolsey tried to get the money, but Parliament refused Wolsey to start a new tax. However, by royal decree, Wolsey started this tax anyway, and many people refused to pay it. So for example, there was a rebellion with 10,000 men, and so the tax was abandoned and Henry made peace with France. This resulted in Wolsey being humiliated and his reputation was badly damaged. And this was the first time that Henry began to doubt Wolsey and kind of strengthen the positions of any enemies that Wolsey had due to the enclosures and everything. And so this kind of marked the start of Wolsey's downfall.